WWF Sweden is one of the world's biggest global NGOs on environment and sustainability, and we have two big global goals: to help us stay within one planet and to preserve the biodiversity. And we're launching our Living Planet report in a couple of days, and we are also open for, and if one of you wants to come and listen, you can still express your interest on our website for that. The Living Planet report tells us what the state of the planet is and what we need to do to move to preserve our planetary boundaries. And my work here at WWF Sweden has to do with coordinating our Swedish food work and interacting with our global community on these issues. And one of the first questions that we identified was the importance of working with meat. And we got an amazing opportunity to work with a meat guide, which we have been doing since 2015, and I'll tell you a bit more about it. Because it all has to do with how we stay within one planet, the one planet food. Now, one of the first things we did at WWF was to zoom in on, okay, how much meat is it possible for us to eat? We have two big lines of communications: it's less and better meat. So the less meat means that we in Sweden need to eat about half of the meat that we today eat, which moves us down to about 500 grams per week of cooked meat. Essentially 2 or 3 normal meals of meat per week, which is a big change for many of us. And this is a challenge. We need to see peak meat, and we need to see a quick lowering of the amount of meat that we consume. We launched a meat guide, and this we took over from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences and continued to develop. And it's quite an interesting concept because it merges 5 aspects of sustainability on the meat sector. It's climate, biodiversity, chemicals and pesticides, animal welfare, and this year we have added the parameter of antibiotics. And there are conflicts of interests between these categories, which means it's quite important to illustrate environmental performance in all of these categories. And it's all available on our website, but you can see the concept also builds on a traffic light system where we have green, yellow, and red light within all these categories. And that means we get a system that looks like this, where we have the traffic lights here for the 5 different categories, and we also have a simplified consumer adapted communication which moves meat into different categories. Now, in this excellent report that is fresh from the print, you can also see that there has been some work in structuring the meat into different categories, because meat is a very, very complex question. The production of meat looks very different in different contexts. And this guide is developed for a Swedish context. You can see a Northern European context. My Finnish colleagues are right now adapting the guide for a Finnish guide, and we're seeing the guide moving in this context. But we need to also be aware that the production, even within this context, this guide contains a lot of simplifications, and when we move abroad, it needs to be more deepened. But so this is just to show you beef and pork, and we have all the different types of meat: chicken, lamb, and game, and we also included cheese and pulses, or not pulses, but the plant-based protein that's on your plate, because this is focused on the plate, which gives us a good tool to work with transformation, and it's transformation of consumption and of production, because by making clear the criteria that you see on the right hand, you can see the actual criteria, but that is essentially the list of criteria that we use. By making the criteria clear, we can go into a dialogue with producers and to see how you can move towards sustainability. It has its challenges, but it's a good first step and a good tool. What you can see here is translated into English. It's still in translation. We have been working from a Swedish point of view, but we're now translating it to move towards spreading of this guide in the WWF context. So my colleagues in the WWF offices working on food are interested in what we're doing and will be starting to learn more about how this can be adapted. We developed also an app for the Swedish setting, which is a good tool when you're in the shop. You can search for different types of meat and check if they have a green, yellow, or red light. Now, I know we're moving into coffee soon, but I want to tell you a bit about our challenges, because this is a quite difficult work that we're going into. One big challenge, as I said, is the internationalization. We need also in this Swedish meat guide to have a deeper knowledge of the imported meat. We have made an initial scan on it, but we need to have more categories and to more illuminate how sustainability initiatives abroad can be lifted up in this meat guide and made available to consumers and to procurement people who want to get a hold of more sustainable meat. For that internationalization, the translation is a very good first step. I mean, we have to make this work visible and available. We also see some more aspects that we need to cater for. For example, eutrophication, water issue, quite important, connected to meat. Not at all easy to move into, as some of us know very well here in the audience. And also the aspect of resource use. That is also a quite clear conflict of interest, where you have, for example, the cattle that have high emissions of climate, but are excellent at using the resource of marginal lands, of grasslands, of pasture lands that are not valorized in a wise way in our food systems. We also need to work more on this balancing of the consumer communication on one hand that needs simplification, and the procurement tools and the deeper work, the deeper communication that we need when we're talking to procurement and to those who actually will be reaching the consumers in an indirect way. We have a big challenge right now that this guide companies who are moving forward and putting more higher procurement demands are actually disqualified by this guide. So we are moving into a discussion on how we can balance these two interests and how to communicate on the meat guide. So that was the related to the last question, how to deal with the companies that are going forward in countries with weak legislation and weak follow-up of legislation. So we have quite a steep work in front of us. I think we need ambassadors. We need people to spread the word on less but better meat. We need more people like Adam, who's working on the better meat issue, and we need to work to get this concept of peak meat to actually materialize. We can see on the statistics that the meat consumption in Sweden seems to have reached a level, and some countries can also show a decline in meat consumption, notably the United States of America, which is quite interesting. And we need to help here. So more vegetarian food and more inspiration on pulses, more work on vegetarian protein on the diet, and more collaboration in the sector.